Hi, in this video, we are going to discuss sampling and parameters, and we're also going to discuss statistical design. And fair warning, before we get started, this is a new computer. So this is the first time I've recorded a video like this on here. I don't quite know how to write on the screen yet, so I'm just gonna type, but I will figure it out soon. I just wanted to make sure to get this video up so you had plenty of time to work on it. Okay, so here's the first section. And so what you should be doing is either printing out this worksheet, or if you have a tablet that you could write on, that would be great. Last choice would be to write it on a separate sheet of paper. And the reason I say that's the last choice is because you're going to be able to use your notes for the test. So if you have the notes with all the definitions written down and all the questions written down, like is on this sheet right here, if you're able to print this, then it'll make a lot more sense come test day. If you just have a piece of paper with just the answers on it, that's not going to help you. So if you're able to print this or write on a tablet or some sort of technology, there is really cheap printing available at school. So let me know if that's something you're interested in. Okay, so first up, 1.1a is sampling and parameters. And so what we're going to talk about here, some vocabulary words, starting off with population. Population is the whole group of things we're talking about, the whole group of people, the whole group of objects. It typically begins with the word all. So if we are studying people that go to a football stadium, we're not necessarily going to interview every single person in a football stadium if we were trying to survey some sort of question. However, the population would be all the people in that football stadium. A sample is a subset or smaller portion of the population. That would be the more manageable group that we could ask the question to. So maybe we ask 100 people a question at the football stadium. That 100 people would be our sample. The population would be all the people in the stadium. The sample would be the 100 people in the stadium that we asked the question. Okay, so then data, just throw this in because we got to learn this vocabulary word somehow, or at some point. Data is what we get when the population is sampled, and data sounds singular, but it's actually plural. So they, as in the data, may denote numbers or words. And so yeah, it sounds weird grammatically sometimes because data is actually a plural. Like fish or deer, there's a couple words like that. Okay, so data could be numbers. If we ask the people in the football stadium, how long was your commute to this game? That would be numbers. If we ask the people in the football stadium, which is your favorite team? That would be words, but they're all still just answers from the group that we're interviewing. Okay, now the next two words, parameter and statistic, they go along with population and sample. And so parameter is a number from the population. They're both P words. Population is all of the people. Parameter is the number describing the people. So if I said, how long did it take you to commute to the stadium today? That number answer, that would be the parameter for the parameter would be that number for the whole population. Statistic, it's an S word, so it goes along with sample, is the number describing the sample. And so P parameter goes with population, S statistic goes with sample. So let's look at this first question. You want to find the average test score of students in every math class in 11th grade. There are 15 classes in 11th grade. You survey the scores of 7 of the math classes. You calculate the average test score of those 7 classes is 83%. So we want to find the following. Okay, so here we go. I'm writing with Zoom's features. We'll see how well this works. Okay, so population, we're talking. So first of all, let's look at this. There's a bunch of numbers in this problem. 11th grade, that's the number technically, but it's just the name of the people that we're talking about. We're talking about juniors. If I had rewritten this problem and said, every math class a junior is taking, it would be the same thing without the number. So that number is not important to this problem. That's just the name of the group that we're talking about. So the population is going to be all, because population starts with all, and we're talking about math classes in 11th grade. Now, technically, if you just wanted to take the words directly from the problem, it says every math class in 11th grade, it means the same thing. But I just like to get into the habit of always saying all for population. So that way we don't forget it later. Because if you just said math classes in 11th grade without saying how many, that's not the right answer. You need to somehow say that it's every single one, or that's why I use the word all. Okay, sample. What is the group we are interviewing, surveying, whatever we're doing? And so we are looking at 7 math classes in 11th grade. So the sample is the number or the group of people that we're interviewing. And so here it says we're surveying 7 of the math classes. So those 7 math classes would be our sample. It doesn't have to be a number, but typically population is all, and then sample is like a specific number of people or of things or of groups. Okay, now on to parameter and statistic. Parameter is the number describing the population, and statistic is the number describing the sample. We only have one more number left, and that's 83%. So one of these doesn't have an answer. So it says you survey the scores of the 7 math classes, and you calculate the average test score is 83%. Okay, so we calculated that based off of the 7 classes we were looking at. So since the number 83 is based off of the sample, then it will be our statistic. So the statistic is 83%. And we could put average, we could say average score of, if you want some more words, average test score is, sometimes I like to just copy the problem exactly word for word, because then I know, like, okay, I have enough information. If you just put 83%, that would be fine too. But that leads us to parameter, which we don't have any more. So a parameter has to be a number describing the whole population. This one, we're just going to say not given. It is what it is. We don't have any more numbers. We don't want to force anything in there. The parameter is not given. If the parameter was given, it would look like this. It would say, you calculate the average test score is 83%, and then there'd be like one more sentence that says, therefore, the average test score of every 11th grader in math class is 72%, or something. Somehow it would give you a number for the population. We don't have to guess it. We don't have to make it up. If it's not given, it's not given. Okay, so moving on to the next section. I have to clear this, so hopefully you have written it down, and I will scroll. I'm actually getting better with these Zoom features. I used to be terrible at writing on them, but hopefully I'll have figured out my pen soon. Okay, part 2 of this section is the kinds of sampling. So this, I didn't say this at the beginning. This chapter 1 is just vocabulary. So it's just a lot of words. Make sure you have them handy for definitions, because the first test is going to be a lot of, like, what does this word mean? What is that word? What are we talking about? Okay, it's kind of like these next few problems. All right, so here's some 4 different types of sampling. We'll talk about a few more in a different video, but here's like the 4 main ones. So convenient sampling is what is convenient. So for example, you ask, like, you just turn to your neighbor and you ask them a question. You ask the people in your house, and that's your survey. You're at the grocery store, so you just ask people in line the survey. It's a terrible way to find a sample. It's convenience because it's whoever's next to you. And you didn't have to work really hard. Maybe you're like, oh, I need 40 people to answer this. So you go to your biology class and just ask everyone that was in lab that day, or in lecture, however that works out. Again, it's just convenient. It's not really scientific at all. The next 3 are, all right, so systematic. It says you pick a starting point at random and systematically take things at a specific number. Okay, so we're at the football stadium again. There's 40,000 people at this game. We are not going to ask all 40,000 people. So one thing we could do is we could stand at every, not we, one person, but we as like a group of people could stand at every gate, and you have 2 partners. One person asks the question and the other person just counts, and they count all the people walking through. And every time they get to 100, They're like, go talk to my friend, they have a question for you. And then they start counting again. They get every 100th person, every 75th person, you know, some sort of system to their counting, and they just count. And then that's how they pick who they interview. So it's more random than the convenient sampling, because convenient would just be to ask the first 10 people through the gate and be like, okay, I'm done. You know, so this has more of a pattern to it. But we started at one person at random, and then systematically, in this case by counting, we count out the number and then ask that person. Okay, the next two, cluster and stratified, are similar, but not the same. So cluster, it says you split the population into clusters, which are then chosen at random. All the objects are included. So think about classrooms. You have 5 classrooms in a row. All the classrooms are full of people. You pick one of the classrooms and ask everyone in that class what your question is. So they're in clusters. We can choose, or they could self-select the clusters, and then we ask everyone in that cluster. Pros and cons, you know, depending on how the groups were chosen, you might not get a very good sample. If you're just doing all 10 a.m. classes, that's not going to be a very good sample of people throughout the day, because 10 a.m. people might have different opinions of campus as like the 5:30 p.m. classes. Another way, taking it out of school, like let's think about the counties. California has 58 counties. Those are already clusters. They're already bunched up, you know, people are already split into 58 groups. So you choose 4 counties off the map and you interview everyone in that county. Okay, so if it was me, I would pick counties that were small, so I didn't have to interview as many people, which then leads to problems like small county thinking versus like LA County thinking, or what's another big county? San Diego? I don't know. There's a couple of big counties. You know, so pros and cons. People usually live, well, I guess they don't really live by people that, well, yeah, you kind of live by people that have the same opinions. Like you could make stereotypes right now about different parts of California, like, oh, that area is super liberal, or oh, that area is super Republican, you know, so that might not be a very good, you know, cluster sampling isn't the best. Stratified is pretty good because you group people based off of certain characteristics. Now, it could be physical characteristics about them, you know, even their age. It could be just maybe more random characteristics about them. Like, you know, have you ever been in groups like lines for registration where it's like A through H is your last name, A through H, you go in this line, and then I through M in this lane, you know, like, so they group you by your last name. That's another way you could do this, this grouping. You could say everyone with blue eyes over here, everyone with brown, I can't even think of eye colors. You know, just put them in groups. And then what you would do, instead of choosing an entire group, because now they have something in common. All the blue-eyed people are over here, all the brown-eyed people are over here. If I take the whole group all has brown eyes. They all have something in common. We wanted variety. So what we would do, now that they're in groups by characteristics, we would take a few people from each group. So think about high school. You can put all the freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors into, so there's 4 different groups. And then you take 10 freshmen, 10 sophomore, 10 juniors, 10 seniors. You're getting a little bit of every group. So cluster and stratified are both groups. One of them, they just kind of go in groups. You randomly choose a group or a bunch of groups, and you interview everyone in that group. Stratified, they're in groups by characteristics, and then we check a couple here, a couple here, a couple here, a couple here to represent every group. Even the stratified could be like the classroom scenario I talked about before, but instead, you know, instead of the 5 classrooms and we take one whole group, we would take a few people from each classroom. That way we're getting maybe a variety of subjects. If I take only classroom A, I might only have science students. Whereas if I take every single classroom, I'm going to get people in all different subjects. Okay, so that was a lot of explaining, but those words get kind of mixed up sometimes. So I'm going to try to keep the words up while we look at these two problems. It says Annie wants to estimate the average number of AP classes a student at her high school takes. She decides to randomly select 6 classes and use all the students in those 6 classes to estimate the average. So we have groups. We have groups of AP classes. We have AP Physics here. We have AP English. We have AP History. All the AP classes are together, or all the AP classes are the groups, and she picks 6 people out of every group. So we have groups. It has to be one of the bottom 2. But then it says that she took some people out of every group, that would be stratified. So I'm going to go ahead and write down for that one, stratified. All right, number 2, Sarah wants to inspect the cleanliness of the rooms in the hotel. There's 10 floors in the hotel. Each one has, oh my goodness, I already messed up. My son was just talking to me, so forgive my error. I was trying to listen to him and write this. Let me get the eraser. She used all the students in the 6 classes that she chose. Since she used all of them, it was a cluster. Okay, see, it's easy to mix them up. Groups, if she picks an entire group or 6 entire groups, 6 AP classes, everyone in the, then that was a cluster. Sarah wants to inspect the cleanliness in the rooms in a hotel. There's 10 floors. Each floor has, so those are our groups, the 10 floors. Each floor has 20 rooms. So she just picks 2 rooms off of each floor. So the floors are the groups. She does not choose a whole floor. She just picks a couple here, a couple here, a couple here, a couple here. So this one is stratified. Email me if you have questions on that, because they do get confusing, as you just saw. I wasn't reading carefully, messed up. So yeah, just let me know if you have questions on those, and let's look at the next section. Or I guess it's still chapter 1, but the statistical design. Okay, so now we're going to really get into bias in the next video, but here we're just going to talk about a few different ways to have good studies. And so here's the steps that we're going to go through. We are not going to do all of these steps. We're mostly going to focus on 2 and, well, I guess we're going to focus on 2, 3, and 4 throughout this course. But initially we're going to be focusing on 2, and 3. So we first want to write a question that could be answered by collecting data. So my football example, what's your favorite team? That's could be collected by data because there's a word answer. How many minutes did it take you to get to the stadium today? That is also a question that can be answered with data because you have a number, right? It took you 20 minutes. Sorry, I'm spacing out. It took you 20 minutes to get here. That's a number answer. Okay, here's an example that cannot be collected by data. Do you think a lot of college students work too much? First of all, do you think, like, what data am I going to collect? And what does work too much mean? Like, that doesn't even mean the same thing to every person, because I might think, working too much while going to college is 40 hours a week, like a full-time job in college. And then other of you might be sitting there like, I have 2 full-time jobs and I'm going to college. What do you mean that's not a lot? The word too much, a lot, those are subjective. So we don't want to use those. Those are not questions that could be answered by data. So we like things that have simple, like, number answers, or maybe a simple word, like a team, like, what's your favorite color? That's a word, that's a simple word answer. And we could collect data and determine the favorite color of everyone in the class. What kind of car do you have? So some words are good. It's just, we don't want to say like a lot or too much or too little, those kinds of words. Okay, determine what variables to measure and how to collect the data sample. We talked about how to collect it a little bit in just, a minute ago with the different grouping. We'll talk more about what variables to measure in the next few examples. Analyze and create summaries, and then write a report, draw conclusions. This step 4, this is like the last third of the class, is all going to be about creating reports and drawing conclusions. Okay, so here we have a question. So it says a statistics student is doing a project for her class. She wants to make a prediction for the outcome of the upcoming election. There are only 2 candidates, so she decides that her question is, which candidate do people favor in the upcoming election? So that way she can ask people and be like, who do you like? Do you like candidate A or candidate B? And they can just give their answer. And then she can say which one had more answers. She decides to randomly interview 100 students crossing the courtyard on campus about their preference. Is this sample good for drawing general conclusions about the results of the election? Okay, so there's a few things wrong with this. One is kind of small and one is kind of big. Okay, so problem one, so the answer is no, but we don't want to just say no, we want to say why. And so the answer is no, because number one, so crossing the campus or crossing the courtyard is kind of convenient. A convenient sample. It's kind of okay because they are just, it really just depends, because one of the problems that makes it convenient, which is why it's an issue, is that, think about anywhere that you stand that 100 people go by, whether you're in the mall or whether you're in the middle of campus or whether you're at a football stadium, just any scenario. 100 people isn't going to take you that long to get. You're not really going to get the different types of people that go there throughout the day by having 100 students go past you. So chances are it's just going to be all the same type of student. And what I mean by that is, people that are on campus for lunch all have stuff in common. They are available at noon to answer this question. They don't, they're student, they're not working at the moment. They are on campus for lunch, so you're missing all the people that go off campus for lunch. They are on campus, period, so you're missing all the people that are online. So, there's a lot of things that this group of people have in common that doesn't represent everyone on campus. Okay, that's a little problem because, maybe I'm a little overanalyzing this because of COVID and, less people are taking, or more people are taking online classes and stuff like that. But the bigger problem is, this is the other reason is she is interviewing students about a national election. Okay, students, small, tiny little sample of the whole nation. Not even students at her school. That is like a super tiny sample of the whole entire nation. Because just think about, let's just kind of overgeneralize. These students that she's interviewing are like 18 through 22 maybe. Well, there's a lot of people that aren't at her college that aren't being represented. I'm just thinking of the older community. There's going to be 1 or 2 people that are 80 plus on campus, right? But there's not going to be a lot that are walking through this group that she's interviewing. Who else is in the world? There's the people that are business people that are lawyers, people that are, people that have already finished school. They're not getting included. There's people that don't go to school that aren't being included. You see what I'm saying? Like there's so many types of people you could just list off that she's missing from this group. So she cannot the sample is not good for drawing general conclusions about the results because the results are a national election and she's only interviewing a small group of her students. So the sample needs to be based off of the population. Going back a few minutes to the 11th grade math classes, the population was all 11th grade math classes, and the sample was the 5 that 11th grade math classes that she interviewed. They were the same wording. One had all, one had 5. So you can't say the whole nation is the population and these 100 students that she came across at lunch is her sample. It's not representative of the population. So this is not good. Okay, that was a little longer than I meant, but that's okay. We're going to talk about that more as we go on. So let's look at the last part here. We have observational versus experimental. Observational is a study where you just look. That's it. There are no factors that are controlled. So for example, your doctor asks you a survey question. Oh, what's and we're just going to be no politics here. The doctor just says, are you vaccinated? Yes or no. That's it. It's just observation. They're not doing anything to you. They didn't tell you to get vaccinated. They didn't actually vaccinate you. They're just asking you a question and you're answering yes or no. The doctor has, in this question, there's no control. They're not splitting this group and doing something and splitting this group and not doing something. They're just asking a question. They're just observing. A manager wants to determine if people are buying a lot more frozen food or a lot more produce. So they stand at the register and they count the orders of the day, who's buying produce, who's buying fresh produce, who's buying frozen veggies. They're not imposing anything on anyone, they're just watching, they're just observing. An experimental study is where you do split them into groups and you control something. So I want to see if your age affects your heart rate. So I put you in groups based off of your age, and I tell everyone to run for 20 minutes wearing a Fitbit, and I check at the results at the end. The results would be your heart rate at the end. This is an experiment because I'm putting you in groups, I'm telling you to run, and I'm collecting the data at the end. An observational study would just be watching people run, not telling anyone to do anything, no time limits, nothing like that. So an experiment is where you're kind of like doing something to the people, whereas an observation is you're just watching people go about their business. You might ask them a question, but you're not telling them anything. You're not doing anything to them. Okay. So here are two examples. We want to see if it's experiment or observational, and usually if it's an experiment, we want to know what was controlled. So for my example of the running, I split people into groups by age. I tell everyone to run for 20 minutes, and then I check your heart rate. The control factor is the time that you run, because I'm telling you to run for that time. That's the control factor. Okay, so let's look at these last two examples. A manufacturing firm is interested in the effect of temperature on the manufacturing floor and worker productivity. Over the course of the year, the firm randomly samples its 103 sites and records the temperature of and the quantity of items produced. So all we're doing is throughout the year, the firm's like, okay, what's the temperature on this floor? Are you doing a good job? Are you doing a good job? How many items are you producing? What's the temperature over here? Throughout the whole year, they're doing this. This is an example of an observational because they're not controlling anything. Observational study. They're just looking at the temperature. If they chose the temperature, now it's an experiment, but they are not choosing the temperature. It just says throughout the year, they're recording the temperature and how many items are produced on that day. So it's observational. So I just say like just watching temp and productivity. You don't have to write that, but I'm just, so later, why was this observational? That's why. Okay, finally, a biology student is interested in the relationship between temperature and germination time for soybeans. The student gets sample seeds from multiple sources and randomly selects 180. Then he sets up 3 growing stations. Here's the 3 temperatures, 20, 15, and 25 degrees Celsius. He divides the seeds into groups. You see where we're going here? He's dividing the seeds. He's deciding the temperature. Then he's recording the germination time for each seed. And so this one is experiment because he chose all those things. Now, you might think, well, some science student is doing something, of course it's experiment. Not necessarily. The biology student could be out in the field just watching nature happen and just recording the temperature that's happening, recording the time. That's very similar, but that would be observational. But here, he split them into groups. He chose the temperature. And so the controlled factor is temp. The control factor, because that's what he controlled in this group. The control factor is not the germination time because he is not controlling the time. He is controlling the temperature. But this is an experiment because he has that power. He's telling the seeds what to do. Okay, I don't know how long that was. It felt like it took a little longer than I thought this was going to take this morning. Maybe because my son is singing Eminem in the room next door. I don't know. But yeah, so there's section 1.1. I don't know how to end this. Go ahead and go forth and be merry. I will email me with any questions. Yeah, that sounds fabulous. All right. Thank you. Bye.